Hey everyone, welcome back. It is time to talk about 8.3 because it's going to be crazy. Now, during BlizzCon, many people expected to see a repeat of the Argus moment where back in a few BlizzCons ago, Ian dropped the patch destination for 7.3. It surprised everyone and he kind of mic dropped off stage. Well, it didn't really look like that happened this time, but, well, look closer at the final slide of the World of Warcraft BlizzCon presentation. What's that? It's a fish. It's the fish from the N'Zoth Warbringers. So yeah, we pretty much know that N'Zoth is the focal point of 8.3. Now, he's one of the largest villains in the current game, and while we were able to defeat a Titan, let's be real, Argus was weakened and we had the help of the rest of the Pantheon. But with N'Zoth, well, all we have is everyone's favourite Scottish Pebble and the power that we've managed to pump into the heart of Azeroth. So it certainly is set to be a pretty major patch. But first, we're a little bit simple with the edit today. Connell, who does most of the editing for the channel, is on holiday, and I'm currently working on my Wrath of the Lich King documentary, so that still is the focus over the edit. Okay, let's begin with the end of 8.2, because of course, 8.3 will follow 8.2. We can't gloss over how it ends, and the more that I've been thinking about it, the more that I've realized how much potential there is. So, A Shara will almost certainly be defeated by players in a fight. Will she be killed? Almost certainly not. It would be a complete waste of a character. Plus, well, let's think about the patch name. Rise of A Shara. Ian said that they named it quite specifically in an interview and, well, you know, Rise of A Shara. Rise. To me, that's implying that she's being risen, uplifted, perhaps taking on a more important role or an increased level of power. I think we'll probably head into her palace. We'll probably defeat her technically, but things won't go how we'd otherwise expect. Remember that, say, during the War of the Ancients, it was said that she was more powerful than Manaroth. Then she was transformed by N'Zoth. Since then, she's only been gaining power. So that's pretty big. Now, the specifics of how this could end are kind of hard to pin down, but N'Zoth will likely be involved. We're actually going to be seeing a part of N'Zoth in the Crucible of Storms raid. Yeah, a part of N'Zoth. Like, we're told that the old gods are far, far larger than the manifestations that we fight, and looking at Warbringers, A Shara, it certainly does imply that N'Zoth is a really massive scale. Broadly, I think this could go one of two ways, though. So first, A Shara would stay loyal to N'Zoth. He will greatly uplift her, and that will be the rise in Rise of A Shara. The second possibility is that she will double-cross N'Zoth and take power for herself. This could be really, really cool. They could do it in an unexpected way, and it would be more interesting than her just being a disposable villain who is a minion. Plus, imagine if, say, she was defeated, maybe she then double-crosses N'Zoth, she takes some power, and then she travels to the other side of the planet with all of her elite Naga. After all, we are told that ships that travel to the uncharted waters of Azeroth do not return, so maybe that could lead into an expansion that is the backside of Azeroth, which right now has been kind of shrouded in mystery. I mean, if you just think about Nazjatar, well, Nazjatar is Zinashari, which was beside the Well of Eternity, which of course is now the Maelstrom. So that certainly is a source of power that A Shara could potentially use to, well, to gain more power. So there's likely big stuff going on with A Shara at the end of 8.2, but what about with Silvanus? Because she is pictured with the Black Blade of the Empire in 8.2. Now, the Black Blade was used to contain Xal'atath, who was a full old god from the earliest days of Azeroth. This means that the Black Blade is actually able to contain an old god. So Silvanus might be trying to use the Black Blade as a weapon against N'Zoth. It could be that she serves death against, you know, N'Zoth and the Void, or it could simply be that she's taking an individualistic, sort of pragmatic approach to things, at least from her perspective. What we do know, though, is that the Saurfang story is going to continue in 8.2, and this could go in so many different directions. Overall, though, I doubt the player will be killing Silvanus. I think that the likely thing is he'll probably return as an interim war chief of sorts, and that Silvanus will split off, realizing that there's really not much more that she can do for the Horde as its leader. Either way, I think that this story will be major for the identity of the Horde, but probably won't be the core content of 8.3. So overall, Silvanus has an old god prison, A Shara probably doesn't die in 8.2, and N'Zoth is the focus of 8.3's main content. So with that established, let's talk about what it could all look like. Now, one thing that really colors all of this is Azeroth, because right now Azeroth is dying. Now, I'm fairly sure that we'll stabilize her in 8.2 or 8.2.5, and that the battle for Azeroth will be the struggle against N'Zoth for control control of her. Remember that N'Zoth does not want to kill Azeroth. N'Zoth wants Azeroth to survive. Remember that Sargeras wanted to kill Azeroth in order to prevent the Old Gods from corrupting her. So, I speculate that no matter what 8-3 looks like, the central struggle for Azeroth will be the important thing. I think that she will maybe start to go mad, get confused. She won't be able to tell friend from foe. This patch will likely focus on just the battle for Azeroth between the Champions of Azeroth faction and the forces of N'Zoth. But while that's happening, let's talk about the factions. I think they'll get extremely violent. Maybe blinded by righteousness, Anduin begins to slip. He goes further and further to secure victory. Getting more desperate. Maybe the Horde even go a bit lower than they already have. Why? Well, you know, look what happened when Anduin and Silvanus touched the Azerite. They got visions. It clearly influenced them. Well, what if there's more than meets the eye there? Maybe connected to N'Zoth. What if he slowly, you know, gets a little bit more control and stokes the fires? Gan's more focused on his dead son. Assuming a Proudmoore family member dies, maybe Jaina is focused on that. Basically, I think the faction war will get more desperate, more bitter, bringing both factions to a low point. And that's when we get the call from Magni and Khadgar. Basically, it's time for the Champions of Azeroth to band together, step up to the plate, and really that would be the major part of the player's story. And I think that would make a lot of sense. Ultimately, we know the faction war can't go on forever. The question is whether they'll have a big blowout event, whether they'll fully commit to like the largest war we've seen, because the Siege of Dazar'alor is fine, but it doesn't really seem like an endpoint of the war. It seems like a middle. Personally, I think that maybe a little bit of raid or some dungeon content plus some stuff happening in the regular Horde and Alliance territories that isn't Warfronts, I think that'll be a really good way to tie up the war. Maybe that could be 825. But with all this background covered, it's time to talk about the potential content of whatever 8-3 will be. So first up, there's the Rise of the Black Empire idea, and this is the most simple one. It's very possible that the Black Empire will rise up, even quite literally. Now, the Black Empire, as shown in Warbringer's A Shara, is probably millions of years old. That means it's long buried beneath the bottom of the ocean. Well, let's just have a mini continent rise up. Just like with Argus, it would have 3 to 4 zones that would bring us to different parts of the Black Empire, with us finally journeying into N'Zoth's lair, which maybe while it was once his prison, it would now be a big center of power. It would serve as the start of the raid, but there would be a lot more to the raid. This is Blizzard's opportunity to show us the true scale of the universe, to expand on the glimpses given to us during the Star Augur and Argus encounters. Now, they could really explore madness, realms of, sleep, fully go into the cosmic horror, and attempt to show how insignificant we appear in comparison to the scale of what's out there. Much like with, say, Argus, this hypothetical patch would take us to really wild places within the Black Empire, city of Ny'alotha, maybe even some more far-off locations, such that would serve to establish more of the scale of the lore. Now, Ny'alotha might not even be a physical city, though. It might be metaphorical in nature. It might be another plane. If you've watched my video on the puzzle box of Yogg-Saron, then you'll know what I mean, especially thinking about the end of the Nyarlathotep prose poem. Now, in terms of enemies, we'd have N'Zoth, who would almost certainly be inconceivably massive, probably dominating the entire continent with his presence. Remember, these things are so big that ripping them out of the world would threaten to destroy it. So, as for fighting him, well, I imagine we're going to do that in another plane. It probably won't be a traditional fight. We'll maybe fight a manifestation of his essence that's disconnected from his physical presence, something like that. Overall, though, I think this likely would be the Champions of Azeroth faction kind of being like special forces, sneaking about the place doing things, rather than us marching in with big legions of troops. So I think that's a fairly predictable sort of layout for the patch. And even at that, it seems kind of wild. I mean, visually it could be insane, but let's get even more crazy. Hollow Earth. Okay, I'm not doing this just because I watched the Iron Sky 3 trailer. I think that a Hollow Earth idea of a patch would be really cool. So Azeroth is infested by all these old gods such that ripping them out would, kill her. They're just like, they're in too deep. They were in too deep when the Titans arrived. Well, if we were to really go into that idea, and maybe taking inspiration from Deepholm as well, we could be venturing into a new underworld in Azeroth. There'd be multiple new zones. We'd see the literal heart of Azeroth. Maybe that would be our light source. They could go wild artistically, giving us massive shimmering underwater lakes, big crystalline structures, and deep sea inspired hellscapes. And then through all of that, you pretty much weave N'Zoth, old god tendrils, searing void tears, and buried areas of the long forgotten Black Empire, almost like the imagery from Lovecraft's, I think it's The Last City. There'd be just so much like horror potential in terms of the visuals, but also a lot of beauty. Remember that the Emerald Dream directly comes from Azeroth herself, so you can have physical manifestations of that, and indeed, the positive elements of Azeroth, but also some of the negative ones, like, say, the Shadowlands, which is kind of spooky. And think of the various realms that, say, Gandalf fought the Balrog through. It could be kind of cool. Now, this all seems a little bit mental, but you know what? It's not much more mental than blasting a chunk out of a far-off planet that's been, like a big teleportation portal has appeared, and then flying to it through a spaceship so that Space Satan stabs our planet with a, planet-sized sword. Hollow Earth's not that crazy in comparison to what we just did on S7.3. I mean, come on, this is a game where we started off like killing boars to make Westfall liver pie. Anyway, so we've got one possibility that's a new mini-continent and is pretty traditional. We then have one that's pretty wild and takes us to like the underworld of Azeroth. Whatever happens though, they've got to add a new landmass. That's just a part of how WoW patches work. And as much as I do love the Hollow Earth idea, I think it likely will be a risen up Black Empire. And if they really want to excite people, then they just call it Ny'alotha. We've been teased about the Sunken City for a very long time, and while there are many reads of what it could be, the literal one is just that it's a big old god city, and that would be pretty cool. As for where it would be, well, that's just hard to tell. The world map is certainly getting quite crowded. Now, it is possible that Ny'alotha could be something completely different. Based on the various references to it, you could read Ny'alotha as not being physical. You could see it as being a dream realm. Alternatively, they could further lean into the cosmic horror and have Ny'alotha be a cosmic location of central importance and focus to the old gods as a species, as a class of beings, regardless of what planet they landed on. Because remember, there's old gods everywhere, all across the cosmos. The 5 in Azeroth are really not that big in comparison to everything else that's out there. So overall, I think we're going to get somewhere that truly just feels alien. Most places that we go to, they're either developed places or they're remnants of a civilization. Either way, their design follows through, from what we're used to, what, say, a roughly 6-foot being can walk around in. Well, in a Black Empire area, it's totally different. It's hostile, it's alien, it's not built for us. It's an opportunity for Blizzard to have their just most out there, their most ambitious art yet. But here's the big question. How would this patch end? Because Blizzard almost certainly want to set up more plot lines and expand the narrative possibilities available to them. They can't just kill us off and call it a day. There needs to be an unintended consequence. Think back to Argus. Sargeras stabbing the planet led to faction tensions because of Azerite. We are then told that as far as the Void is concerned, there was a victory that went unnoticed. Well, that's something that, that quote, we still don't understand that yet. So I think that 8.3 will end up establishing really major lore. Perhaps we will get something in the backside of Azeroth. Maybe Ny'alotha will be revealed as a far-off cosmic location that is the heart or maybe the source of the galaxy-wide old god corruption. Perhaps who's in charge of death will play their hand against N'Zoth. Maybe Silvanus will be a large part of that. Maybe it will establish the Shadowlands as a place we could go to in the future. There's just so much that can happen, and judging by the last expansion, I think something massive will happen at the end of patch 8.3. So there we go. That is my speculations and my thoughts, technically based off one slide at the end of BlizzCon. But regardless, I think it's really cool. I love talking about the old god stuff and bringing in the Lovecraftian, inspirations, the cosmic horror, and then playing around with the characters that we have right now. It's just going to be really interesting. Personally, I think Silvanus will be like a major third-party character. She's not going to be faction-based. I think Thrall will come back. He'll be installed by interim war chief Sarfang, and we'll end up with a pretty honorable alliance, a pretty honorable horde, then a massive threat with Death, or maybe, Death will have multiple sides to it. Some of them will be our friend, like Bolvar, and others won't. I think we'll have that. I think we'll have some sort of big old god reveal, and probably something going on with A Shara as well. And that'll be like 3 different directions the plotline could go in. Maybe in addition to us having a big space adventure with the Ethereals as teased by 7.3. Anyway, that's what I thought. Let me know what you thought down in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.